Hi everyone, this is Faciliating. I wanted to share a presentation that I recently did for a company and specifically the Canadian Embassy here, where I talked about open dialogue in intimate relationships. And because of my own personal journey in my partnership, as well as the ongoing journey I have with all my clients, that this topic is really near and dear to my heart. I'm still very much in the learning process, but I wanted to share some key points from this presentation with you. So to start off, I wanted to just take this opportunity to share a little bit about my family, the silly, spaced out image I have here. And I particularly picked something that isn't the most like professional or presentable, because often life is filled with silly, sad, exciting, frustrating moments. And so often, I think in social media, that we get to these very happy, picture perfect screenshot or a momentary recording that makes us feel bad or negative about ourselves. That's the idea that social media in general is bad for mental health, because it's so easy for us to compare what's going on our insides to what's going on for other people on the outside when it's been packaged. So I wanted to share these very mundane, silly moments where we're most of the time just in neither extremely joyful nor extremely beautiful, but actually just being our everyday selves. And that's really the reality of everyday life. And if we can find the joy and find the triumph and the learning and the highlights in these moments, then we're in a much better place. So I try to find these moments for myself and share with others, and today with you. So you have learned a little bit about me through my channel and my other videos. I'm a registered therapist, as well as a self-growth coach, which is something I often do with all my clients, because even as we're healing, we're growing, and we're always um, working on ourselves, and working together with our family, with our friends, continuously growing, because life changes are constant. And I believe the only response that really helps us get through life with a positive can-do attitude is to keep changing with it, keep growing with it. And sometimes that growth is very uncomfortable. When talking about discomfort, one of the most uncomfortable thing um, that we often go through is this journey of having an intimate relationship with someone, whether you believe in marriage or just lifelong partnership, or even a temporary partnership you're having. Um, Being able to have that in-depth understanding and connection often takes a lot of work. So I wanted to share some of these things that have come up both in my personal life as well as in the lives of all those who I have had the pleasure of working with in my therapy rooms. Of course, I'm not going to talk any confidential private information about them, but it's I appreciate how, having had the opportunity to work with them, I'm accumulating some of these knowledge and understanding of the common struggles, challenges, and victories that we can experience as we work through our relationships. So these are some of the topics, and today I'm probably just doing a part of it. I want to focus on the stages of the relationship that we most likely we all go through if we're committed working on the relationship, and so that we can all understand that we're not alone in some of these struggles, and no one just come to a relationship all ready to be 100% connected and everything is exactly how we pictured it, whether it's by the standard of the movies or by the standard of what we heard or seen in the little snippets of other people's life. In reality, we all go through so many different changes and so many different periods that we are continuously adjusting to. So, talking about open dialogues, I wanted to divide this into two sections. One is when and what to talk about, but a larger section of this will be how to talk about it. Because so often I find that with couples and with myself too, that we know exactly what we want to talk about. There's things that are on our chest we want to get off and we want to explore, and we go to therapy or we do it in our own private bedroom. But often it's how we talk about it that we have the most challenge. And I'm often doing translation of the kind of talks that couples want to have when they come to therapy, and translating that in a way that the words and the intentions are matching each other. The feelings, the gestures, and the impression we're giving off are matching how we're hoping it's received. And that's quite challenging. But let's start with, when and what to talk about. And this is where the stages of relationship can be quite illustrative of the kind of things that we all go through at one point or another. Sometimes it's longer than others. Other times might be slightly out of order, but most of the time we are going through some version of this, right? We start out with, amazing and falling in love is just so exciting to have all that connection, and where we can't even sometimes sleep or eat because how so excited we are to form that both physical, emotional, and sometimes spiritual connection. And this is where, a lot of our hormones are raging, and we have a lot of possibilities. And we imagine that we're going to be, just having the greatest time. And at this stage, often couples don't come to me and are usually not thinking about what's wrong. But gradually, right, depending on how long that lasts, sometimes it's a few months, sometimes it's a couple years, we do begin to see the other person. We begin to actually truly understand and see what the other person's offering, and begin to perhaps slow down or cool down a little bit of that lower body connection, and moving on to the prefrontal cortex and beginning to see each other in ways that are more realistic, right? We begin to have some arguments. We begin to observe differences. Maybe we don't quite understand it yet, but we know the differences are there, and it's uncomfortable. And if that doesn't deter us from commitment, because often in dating relationship, once we get to this stage, it's equally likely that we might give up and say, this is not the right thing for me. I don't want to make compromises. It's not working out. But assuming that you are committed and there's still enough on the table for us to keep going, then we begin to get into a stage where we are with each other long term. We are continuing to make that commitment. However, we are beginning to identify the areas that we would love it if the other person could just change. And we begin to see patterns, how we connect. We begin to have some power struggle, who is in charge of certain aspects of your life. We are more committed for sure, but we're also more committed to, in some ways, changing the other person. Right? If you only were a little bit more talkative, if you're only a little bit more able to enjoy the outdoors, if you're only able to love reading, fill in the blanks. There's so many possibilities how we show up for each other and for ourselves, that we can totally just thinking that if that person could change that aspect, then everything will be perfect, right? And then we move on to eventually, hopefully, a stage where we truly accept, what the other person is like, and we truly accept what we're like, and then we find ways to build that compromise. We find that bridge, that language, that connection that is really the unique language of connection for the two of you. And it's very different in how it's conveyed and communicated for everybody. There is no formula to that, right? And and sometimes it takes quite a long time together. And I will admit that after 15 years of being together with my partner, I still feel like we're somewhere in this stage where there are some things we have accepted about each other. We love each other, but there are still things that we're just thinking, can we just work on that, change that? We're not quite 100% at the acceptance stage. And acceptance isn't just a conceptual, yeah, we're supposed to accept each other who you are, but actually really accepting at a much deeper emotional and somatic level that this is the kind of person, the kind of energy, the kind of past, and the kind of future I'll be living with. Am I okay with that? Right? And there is some that judgment to be made about whether the kind of compromise, the kind of connection we are able to achieve given our unique history and background is enough. And we're constantly making decisions about committing and recommitting. The famous couple therapist Estelle Perel has said that, throughout the couple's relationship, no matter what challenge you go through, such as infidelity and challenges that you find a lot of hurtfulness, a lot of betrayal, losing trust, you're constantly reinventing your relationship. You're constantly making a decision to recommit to yourself. That's not to say they're not deal breakers. That's not to say at some of these stages you aren't freely able to decide to step out and give up and accept that it's not meant to work. But it's so important that all of these stages we're continuously aware of what's going on and communicate. And this way, whether we're staying or leaving, we're making a very conscious choice. There's a lot of awareness of the other person ourselves. And we're not making it in sort of a rush of emotion or impulses or fear. And of course, if we are so lucky to get to a stage where we're truly accepting of each other and we're truly able to be with each other in the way that we like each other exactly for who we are, not just the beginning, kind of a little bit more passion blinded acceptance of love and connection, but actually the very aware, realistic, authentic connection. And this is where actually I find a lot of couples to rediscover themselves, where they have a lot more investment in themselves and empower themselves, and of course empower each other, but are a lot less reliant on each other for that sense of commitment. And ironically, of course, then they actually have a better connection because they each take responsibility for their own welfare, their own benefit, their own emotional happiness. And again, at this stage, it's possible that you go your separate ways, realizing you're not able to get there. So at each one of these stages, right, it's very important that we're talking to each other. Right? We are communicating, and the more the more communication we do, and sometimes we fumble and we mess it up and we try again. We say the wrong things. We hurt each other. I've done plenty of that. I'm continually exploring, experimenting, but to keep able that open dialogue, that openness about communicating. And I want to emphasize communicating isn't just about words. So often we need to do a lot of communication with the way we're with each other, our body language, our touches, or just being in the same room, being able to do something side by side, whether it's developing interest or just learning to appreciate something that your partner loves. And so there's so many ways of communicating, and we'll get to later on talk about how there's so many different love languages, and part of being together is about training ourselves to appreciate the kind of love language our partner wants to give as well as wants to receive. And that does take work. So what kind of things can we talk about at each stage, right? We can, the first stage, as I said, is usually not the most difficult stage, where we are, usually in a euphoria of connection and a lot of passion. So anything really is on the table, right? Anything you can say, and sometimes we're not really listening to each other yet. So I emphasize and I challenge you to really begin with a listening as a part of communicating, really listening to other persons saying to you rather than what you think they're saying to you, and listening for a true version of the events rather than believing and seeing what we want to see, right? It's very challenging at this stage, but I would say listening is important in every stage. So if anything's on the table, listening should always come with it. And as we get to the next stage, as we begin to see each other more, as we begin to uh, spot differences, maybe have some arguments, this is really a great opportunity to explore your personal goals and understand your habits and share your interests. Of course, all of these is applicable to each stage. It's just sometimes at a particular stage, these things might stand out and might be a better time to start exploring it and to exchange those information. And there's some common themes of things that are really important to get to know ourselves and share that with our partner at each stage. And I'm going to get to that in the next slide. And once we get to that stage where we're kind of struggling for power or trying to figure out patterns and we're hoping the other person would change, this is where we really need to get a better understanding of our mutual expectation to kind of see where the differences, the hiccups are. What's our love language? How do we feel loved, right? It's so much easier when we're in the beginning, we're fresh, kind of falling in love and everything feels like love. But as you begin to have the day to day, and perhaps you even have children at this point, and in the busyness of it, and the fatigue and tiredness of it, how do you instinctually feel loved? Do you feel loved because your partner touched you in a certain way? Do you feel loved because they said some validated words? And do you feel loved because they did something you really wanted them to do? And we're all very different because we come from different families where we've been brought up with different love languages, right? Whether it's you grew up with a culture where it's all about doing things, making sacrifices. I'm thinking about my culture, thinking about Asian culture, often is about acts of service. And we're then attracted to people who are different than us because it's natural to be attracted to cultures and personalities, or even just family culture, even if you come from the same background, that are different, that balance us out. It's natural for us as a product of nature to want to seek that balance. So if we do have someone who present a lot of differences from us, even if we share a lot of things in common, those differences might show up, very likely show up in the love languages and the expectations of what your role is in this communication, in this connection. So it's so important we understand that difference, acknowledge that difference, and then we can decide where to go from there, right? So as we keep working and proceeding to the next stage, this is when we can start consciously making that compromise or consciously making that connection, right? I like to think of it as a way to grow together. And we are giving each other more validation, more trust. And sometimes it involves repairing some of the hurtful things we might have said. We're all trying to change each other. We're not accepting the differences. We're arguing. So this is a stage where we will be ready to make more compromise and to accept and to really give each other a lot more empowerment. And finally, whether we decided to part our ways because we're so exhausted from the compromise and not having it work, or we realize how lovely it is to share that love language, to do the things that make the other person feel loved, then this is where the relationship began to be a lot more natural, and it will always involve some work, it will always involve some intentionality, but in that last stage you're going to be a lot more comfortable. We trained ourselves and we trained each other in some way because, again, assuming good intention, assuming commitment on both sides, we're much more able to carry out those connection and love language naturally. But even then, right, we're constantly changing. All of us are changing, whether it's from having children, or it's our career development, or it's our aging, going through midlife, losing parents. All along our life's trajectory, we'll be changing. and the relationship must evolve with it. So to keep each other abreast, we want to keep updating each other about how we're feeling. Maybe our love language has changed. Maybe the way we want to connect has changed. Never take for granted that somehow there's a formula that's going to be fixed in time and I just need to stick to it. In many ways, we want to be dynamic because that's how we keep our brain growing. That's how we can take advantage of that brain plasticity and keep moving, right? It's so often we talk about that changes and doing things differently to keep ourselves engaged, to prevent Alzheimer's, prevent sort of the slowing down of our brain. If we're truly invested and believe in the kind of relationship where we do not avoid making some effort, we're not afraid of change, then it will continue to be a journey of investing our time and effort. So this is the stages, and next time in part two, I'd like to talk a little bit about the major themes that can create the difference, but also if we understand them about ourselves and about our partner, then we'll be able to have a better clue about what to communicate, how to work on that connection. So I'll start with processing style next time. And thanks for listening.